Bam! MC is in the house. What's up, folks? My name is Justin Garcia, and welcome to the Warrior Stream. I'm here every Wednesday at noon Eastern Standard Time, taking a topic, deep diving, having a good time while doing it. I always appreciate when you guys join me as well. Thinking about black t-shirts, you got lint all over the damn place. So who do we got here? If you are watching, do me a favor and check in. I'm currently streaming on a couple of Facebook pages, on YouTube, on X, and I always love hearing from you guys. So we got my man Jesse. What's up, Jesse? We got Jesse. What's going on? We got my man Corey in the house. What's up, Corey? My man Frank, Big Frank the Killer, is there. What's going on, brother, man? Good to see you. Aaron, my girl up in Canada. What's going on, darling? Good to see you. Hope everyone's well. The family's well. Speak of the devil. Here's my man Jamie. And good to see you, too. Johnny Groob's in the house. Good to see you, brother, man, as always. Who else we got here? We got my man Willie. Good to see Willie, as usual. Usual suspects. So while you guys are signing on, and I appreciate you guys commenting, a couple of things I wanted to cover before we get into the topic of the day. And that, number one, are the emails. The emails that I send out every morning. I've gotten more people asking me, am I getting emails? Am I not getting emails? Like, have you been sending them out? I still am sending out emails every single day. If you are not getting them, it is because it's either going in your spam box or you need to just update your subscription. You can just go to masterchim.com and do that. Links in the description in case you forget masterchim.com. But you go there and they have the subscription thing there. Email providers, email service providers, like I'm currently using a service called Berserker Mail. I used to be part of Infusionsoft, which turned into Keep, which if anybody is looking for an email service provider, I would absolutely give the exact opposite of a recommendation when it comes to using Keep. It's just been very underwhelming. You know, sometimes when I'm coaching my either individual coaching students or in my group coaching, I'm always talking about being the solution to somebody's problem. Like, if you could understand what it is that you are, helping somebody with, it sort of populates what you should be doing, because them getting help is sort of the mission of what this process looks like. Case in point, I mentioned on social media, I don't think I mentioned it during this show last week, but I had written a book for my youngest son. It wasn't specifically for him, but it was certainly motivated, inspired by a conversation I had with him, whereby I asked him, he just turned 12. I asked him what book he was reading, which is a regular thing. And he showed me the book that he was reading, and it was a book that he was already reading. And I said, thought to myself, well, how come he's not reading another book? Asked him about it. He said, well, there's nothing here, so that was really interested in reading. So until we got something else, I was just going to reread this because I enjoyed reading it before. So I said, all right, you know what? I'm going to use that and just write a book that would fit, his needs. And I did that. So the thing that I produced, the book that I produced, was a direct result of there being a need that I saw. So I addressed that need with my skill set in the form of what will eventually be a product. I'm going to, publish it and everything. Why not, right? So the idea of, we need to keep that connection is a thing. Now, why did I go on this diatribe? Because the email service I was using before was the exact opposite of that. My emails were being affected significantly through no action of my own, being that I was doing the same thing I was always doing. And I had sought assistance and was told in no uncertain terms, well, you have to learn how to write better emails. And so I wound up changing email service providers. But the list that I had, which at one point was around 10,000 and is now significantly under that, because if I had to scrub and opt out and all these other things, I'm losing the ability to deliver them. Case in point, my own email was going in my spam box. And that made no fucking sense to me. So if you're not getting my daily emails, it's a long way to freaking go about that story. But if you're not getting my emails, check in your spam box, spam folder, mark it as not spam, obviously. And if you still don't see it and you're supposed to get it, just do me a favor and go resubmit your email on masterchim.com. All right, that was supposed to be about 30 seconds and wasn't. All right. Aaron says, glad to say I've started seeing them again. Weak arguments or arguments for weakness. Right on. That was the quote of the day in today's email. I'm glad. Yeah, and Aaron, I think last time we spoke about it, it was in your spam box. Jan Saxa, what's up, Don? Good to see you. Terrytown Vibe says, what's good, MC? Streaming live from the new residence. Monk mode activated. Right on. Making it happen. Making it happen. Very good. Cherrytown Vibe is one of my students at the Jungle Gym in the Bronx. So good to see he's crushing it as usual. So let's get into the topic of the day. All right. Strength always wins. So I had these things made, right? And these buttons, I had them made just because I got an email asking if I wanted to buy buttons. And I was like, yeah, I got an image I'd like to see on a button. So I ordered buttons. And I have all these buttons. And I'm thinking about what I wanted to talk about today. The box of buttons just happened to be on my desk, and I glanced over. And I went, okay, yeah, that's something that I haven't hit in a while. Something that's sort of like a bedrock foundational concept of my philosophy, this idea of strength always winning. And I wanted to discuss it today. So what this concept is not is a argument for why you should be doing something other than what you're doing. Here's an uncomfortable truth. Some of you guys, some of you will never be strong enough to make the changes that would be necessary in order for you to not be so miserable. It's somewhat paradoxical. I use that word a lot, but I think it applies here. It's somewhat paradoxical because it's almost like in order to be stronger, you need to be strong enough to be stronger. In order to be stronger, some of you need to be strong enough to become stronger. So it seems paradoxical, but what it really comes down to is the type of strength that is on the other end of a decision versus the type of strength that's on the other side of a process. The strength I'm talking about, most people not having, is the one that is on the other side of a decision. If you want to become stronger, in other words, increase your capability in order to be able to pursue more effectively the movements and missions that are appropriate for you, you have to decide to be able to do that. You have to decide in order to be able to do that, that you're going to do that. It's starting to become circular. I've coached a lot of people over the years, a lot of men specifically for the last, 15, 20 years in both martial arts, what I would call pressure coaching. I have my pressure process and then, business coaching, tribal coaching, leadership coaching, all the applications of what really amounts to my philosophy applied to these different areas in ways that could help people in their pursuit of it. And probably the biggest obstacle that I've always encountered, the most commonly encountered is men's unwillingness to admit he needs change. And sometimes that lack of admission comes in the form of a reluctance to move in a new direction. If I tell somebody they need to do something differently than the thing they've been doing their entire adult lives, there is the potential for an existential threat that occurs. And I understand that in my expectation of them moving, but I maybe need to threaten their existence a little bit by saying they are going to be doomed to live the life that they do not want if they do not have enough leverage to be able to make the decision necessary to move in the better direction. So all that being said, today is not about rectifying that for people. Today is not about, convincing you to be awesome, so to speak. Today is about really what just the rules of the game are. Meaning, you could take these rules of the game and do whatever the fuck you want with them. But if you're somebody who actually wants to make change, somebody who actually wants to move in a direction that's more congruent with who you claim to be, then let's actually give you the backdrop, from which you could move consistently in that area. So when I say strength always wins, the first thing that happens is people want to reduce that to some sort of, physical assessment that I'm making. Like, oh, you should always be stronger, as if the person who's perceived as being more immoral is inferior to the person who physically can destroy them. This statement often gets reduced to that type of dichotomy. Oh, you're just talking about physical strength. It's like, well, there's also, Master, there's also, there's intellectual strength, and there's also emotional strength. And it's like, well, you do realize, that all of those are strengths also. Like, if I say strength always wins, and then your reply is, well, not everything's about physical strength. It's like, well, I didn't say physical strength always wins. You fucking idiot. Listen, words kind of mean things, right? So strength always wins is really, first and foremost, a commentary on the universal concept of strength. Its applications are varied, but we're not there yet, right? We're at the highest application or idea of what we're talking about here, and it's strength in the most universal of senses. Always, right? Always means it's consistent, meaning it's a law. As much as we know anything in the physical world to be a law, strength always winning is also a law. That's what the use of the term always means. So strength, let me do a better job closing that up first before we start going down to always and wins. But strength is really the amount of movement and momentum that could be driven in one direction, such that it overcomes any opposition to it, right? So it's strength is the ability to overcome friction or conflict or any oppositional force that may be in its way, right? The stronger we are, the more we could overcome in terms of that oppositional resistance. So that's strength. Always, I just broke it down before, it means it could be consistently relied upon, right? In an absolute sense. And then wins. So wins implies some sort of dichotomous win or lose scenario. Either you're on this side or that side. Either you've succeeded or you've failed. And in that sense, if we look at what strength is, we understand that what we're saying is whoever has the strongest force to overcome the forces against it will win. If I take 1,000 pounds and put it on a bar, right? Physical strength analogy incoming, right? If I take 1,000 pounds and put it on a bar, squat bar, and I get under it and I lift it off, I'll probably be able to lift it off. But if I bend my legs in any way, I'm just going to keep going down to the floor, probably wind up dead or in China, maybe a combination of the both. The 1,000 pounds was stronger than me in that physical application. That is the 1,000 pounds winning, right? And the scenario of who's winning and who's losing is really just comparing the outcome of these forces being applied towards one another. So when one force overcomes another force, it wins. What does it win? It wins the conflict of itself against the other force, right? So strength always wins. Hopefully that makes sense now when I say that statement. So where do people have a hard time understanding this? There is a cathartic function in how we conduct ourselves, where we are, even on a subconscious level, sometimes motivated to feel better than to be better. Because of the different drives that we have as individuals, and because of the different relationships we have with these drives and with the ecosystem in which these drives are applied, there is some degree of trauma We can call it, and I say trauma not as a level of intensity, but let's just say there's a trauma spectrum or scale that goes from hardly noticeable to I'm going to jump off a fucking roof, level of trauma, or I have some sort of psychotic split level of trauma, right? So when I say trauma, I don't mean past a certain threshold of conflict. Maybe I mean damage. In other words, to an individual. As we navigate through life, if we're somebody that cannot sustain the trauma in the form of friction and conflict that a functional life requires us to endure, then we are too weak to be a functional person. I would say to become stronger in that case. But when I say that this hypothetical individual I'm talking about right now needs to become stronger, it is really implying that wherever they are dysfunctionally deficient or functionally deficient, therefore dysfunctional, therein lies where strength needs to be applied. When you have an individual who, in the course of his regular day, gets very, very angry, well, then, in order for that person to sustain his level of identity functionally over time, he needs to have some sort of cathartic ritual. In other words, somebody who walks around getting angry all day needs to spend the bulk of his time getting de-angried, right? Or unangried. The anger, and we could call that sort of the off-mission sort of pivoting that anger does. That needs to be addressed so they can become back on mission. When an individual engaging their regular life has a significant, and I will leave it, abstract, ambiguous with the word significant, right? But they have a significant amount of cathartic requirement. The amount of absolute strength they're going to build is very limited because most of their time, energy, and resources are being dedicated to getting themselves back on track after having knocked themselves off of it. There's some people who need pills to sleep, or so they say. Oh, I need pills to sleep. Well, no, you don't. The human body doesn't require pills to sleep. Oh, and I need pills to sleep. Well, so what if you came about during a time where those pills didn't exist? You're telling me you're going to be awake for 80 fucking years? That's not the way it works. But what winds up happening is we have a deficiency. In order to become functional, where that deficiency lies, we acquire some sort of a tool, right? An external tool, a crutch, we would call it. And what winds up happening is we never discard it. Right? If you break your leg and you get crutches, eventually your leg's better. You throw the crutches away. Another concept or label I use for this concept is the reachable rung. If I tell you, figuratively speaking, we should always be looking to climb our ladder of self-power. Embedded in that metaphor is this idea of rungs and grabbing rungs. And sometimes people enter a phase of their life where in order to maintain that movement of the climb, they have to reach the next rung and it's too far away. In that case, I have the concept of the reachable rung. Well, if the next rung is too far away, meaning you're starting to look internally and you're not moving anymore, and you start telling yourself stories and living inside your head, when that happens, you got to move. What do? You do something that just gets you moving. And I call that thing that gets you functional again in the moment a reachable rung. That should be I need a pill to sleep. There's another friend of mine, I've used him as an example before, who one day told me, I need to smoke weed in order to be able to sleep. And I asked him, well, how much longer are you going to do that? He didn't understand the premise of the question. My question was, well, the human body doesn't need weed in order to be able to sleep. So you're using that to sleep now. Obviously, that's a tool you're using, but obviously, you don't want to have to rely on a tool, right, or a crutch to be able to do something that we're supposed to be able to do, without the tool, right? Oh, well, right. And to most individuals in that particular application, they're thinking, well, listen, weed's legal now. I can get weed. But that's not what I'm talking about. First of all, if something's legal, like, don't ever argue the reason to do something is because it's legal, with me at least, because I don't give a fuck about that, right? I don't design my philosophy and my actions and my connections and my rituals based on what's legal and not legal. Now, listen, there are some ways where, okay, I will do what's legal because the alternative will have a consequence that I'm not interested in. But something being legal does not make the individuals who are following the legal act more powerful because of it, right? So there's no real value. It's really the avoidance of consequence, right? That we pay attention to laws with. But anyway, so the guy who's smoking weed to be able to fall asleep, how much longer do you need to do it? Didn't have an answer for that because he had never thought about an answer for that because there's nothing in his environment that told him he should have an answer for that. So what winds up happening is, because we remain functional, we don't look to discard all of the tools and crutches that we accumulate, I would argue, unnecessarily for the long term. I had many coaching students over the years that were on antidepressants. I never told them not to be on antidepressants. I would never tell somebody who's taking antidepressants to not use antidepressants. But what I did ask was, how long you got to take them for? Which again, well, what do you mean? Well, obviously, like humans don't need antidepressant drugs in order to be able to be functional. So obviously you're using it because of something, the state that you're in right now, or something you're going through right now. But obviously the human body doesn't need this. So I'm just asking, what's the path to not having to take them anymore? And again, doesn't have an answer because never thought to ask the question. So of course wouldn't have an answer for that. The last person who's going to say that is the doctor, right? The person who's prescribing it, the person who's paying the mortgage on his second and third home on you taking these things. And I'm being a little, over the top, but you guys understand what I'm saying. So there's an idea that in order to be successful, we need to be stronger than the oppositions to our success, the opponents to our success. That requires strength. Why are we not successful? Because we're not good enough. Whenever one of my fighters would lose a fight, at no point would I look to make the argument that he lost because of any other reason than he was not good enough at fighting that particular night. I could add some conditions to it to make the guy feel somewhat, like a human being after the conversation. But I am not going to ever be the guy that says, you were really tired, or you came back too soon, or, this opponent. It's like, shut the fuck up. Were you physically able to do all the things necessary to win a fight? Yes. Then shut the fuck up. He was just better at doing what he wanted to do than you were at doing what you wanted to do. Which starts to get at the heart of why this observation, strength always wins, has any utility for us. When we say that, it's not to make you feel bad. It's not also to give you the opportunity to put some sort of facade of, oh yeah, well, I'm strong, so I'm good, right? I'm good. I should always win, right? It's like, no, this is a process that is always going to evolve in our lives. And it really comes down to, by saying strength always wins and believing that concept, whenever we feel we haven't won, it immediately begs the question, well, what are the forces, the force or forces that were stronger than the forces that I was generating? Which gives us a better understanding of what we tried to do and why it didn't work, which allows us to devise a more effective plan moving forward. We don't have to be perfect, but we have to move, right? So when I say strength always wins, it also immunizes you, inoculates you from the manipulations of other people who thrive on the ability and the outcome of them convincing you that you need external help to be successful. Or what I call the fairy godmothers, right? The people who walk around saying everything should be fair, and they convince you that it wasn't fair. You didn't win because it wasn't fair. You don't have what you want because it's not fair. You can't go where you want to go because it's not fair. Those are the fairy godmothers. They go around convincing people that it's some external reason why they haven't gotten what they've wanted, what they've claimed to have pursued at that point. I think it's a problem when we have people close to us that are too willing to tell us it wasn't our fault. How about this? Instead of looking to console somebody, instead of whatever that looks like for you, don't worry, you'll get him next time. It's okay. Or even worse, oh, well, it wasn't right. They shouldn't have done that. How about instead of doing that, you just say, so what are you going to do? And can I help you do it? What if you just replied with that? That is a strength-based reaction. I remember when I was a teenager, I was 15 years old. I was sitting in a police precinct in Westchester, New York. I had just gotten arrested for a whole bunch of things. This was the beginning of that whole saga that had me wind up spending a summer in prison about a year later. And I'm sitting there in the precinct. I had just gotten taken out of school and humiliated in front of the school by a bunch of detectives where, I got called out of math class. I think I was in calculus, right? I think I was in like a calculus class. They called my name to go to the principal's office, I get up, walk to the principal's, two detectives there. And everything they claimed that I had done, I had done. They got it right. And I sat there and I was just like, and they were there to arrest me. And so I asked them, I was like, can I just walk to the car, so I'm not, humiliated in front of everybody. And they went, nope. And they made me stand up, put the handcuffs on behind my back. And they walked me through the middle of the hallway right while classes were changed. So everybody got to see me. Bit of a scumbag thing to do, but you know what? I wasn't necessarily a nice guy, so I was going to be all right. But anyway, fast forward to I'm in the precinct. They call my mother. My mother gets there, and they start reading down the list of what happened. And then he did this, and then he did that. I'm not going to repeat what happened, right? But let's leave it in the abstract, right? They just went down the bullet point list because there was a list, right, of things that I did. And at the end of that, my mother, right? My mother, talk about ride or die. She looked at the detectives and she said, "There's no way my son did that." And when she said that, I'm next to her. I put my hand on her arm, like Ma, just let them finish. And she saw my hand went on her arm, and as she said that, she looked and saw, and without missing a beat, she looked at him and said, "And if he did, they fucking deserved it." I don't think she cursed, but that's what she said. And it was like, oh my God. And I'll tell you right now, there was certainly now listen, a mother's love is a mother's love. But that was the last thing that I needed at that point. So what I would say is that when that happened, my mother would have had to have been somebody else. My mother's never going to be the person to sort of hold me to the fire. That's just not who she is. But me at 15 years old, that's what I needed, right? My father worked all the time, right? My father, I saw my father every day, but he was always either just coming back from work, about to go to work. He used to bust his ass. So I had a lot of fire that didn't have any control to it. So I went out thinking that, sure, strength always won. And as a 15-year-old, I understood that in the way that I wanted to understand it. But what I didn't understand were all the other variables that were at play. And the formulas that I had earlier on were very physical formulas. Growing up, in the neighborhoods I grew up in, and, we moved a bunch, and, remember, like, my father was Puerto Rican, my mother's Irish, Italian. When I was with the white kids, I was the Puerto Rican. When I was with the Puerto Rican kids, I was the white boy. And I was always on the periphery of every social group that I had been exposed to growing up. So I developed a hard shell and a lot of the formulas that went along with it. But as I started getting older, as I started going into sort of more socialized environments based on academics and things like that. Those hood formulas did not have a place there, but that's exactly what got me in trouble. I didn't have an understanding of what strength looked like in these other situations. So I brought the strength formulas that I understood with me. It's sort of like you're going to let's say you're going to build a computer. I don't even know how to build a computer, but let's just say you're going to build a computer. And in order to build a computer, you go and get your tool bag. And your tool bag has a wrench, it has a hammer, right? It has a saw, it has a screwdriver, it has these are not the tools that you are going to need for this job. But in order to build, let's say those are the only tools you had to do any building. So to build, we're building a computer, I'll bring my building stuff. There are times or aspects of our life where we are very strong and it is functional in that application. The problem is that we will reduce our lives to those applications where we're strong instead of taking a good hard look at where we're deficient and then endeavoring to build strength in those areas of deficiency where growth occurs, right? There are times where I admit, I'm not somebody that's there's a certain level of company I could be in while still remaining functional. It's very hard for me, admittedly. And I say this, it's funny because I could be, I got the camera here, I'm on the internet, you guys are all over the planet for all I know. And I'm sharing things here without any of the energy that would be there if we were in the same room. But there's some people I just can't be around without saying the things that I feel almost compelled to say. And I will say it's not some sort of admission that I'm deficient in this area and I refuse to work. No, I make the conscious decision to stay this way. Because I also know that some of the most valuable applications of my time come from me being the person who sees things that other people don't see about themselves and has the courage to say it. So it's who I am. It's not very easy for me to be around a lot of people because of that. But all that being said, there are areas of my life that require me to acknowledge that if I don't have strong enough tools, I am going to lose. I mentioned earlier that company that I was using, Keep or Infusionsoft. It used to be Infusionsoft. In order to cancel, you have to get on the phone. And I'm speaking to the lady and saying, I just want to cancel my account. Oh, you have to speak to one of our success managers, our client success managers. And so, listen, I help people with their businesses. I understand. I know what the fuck is happening. I'm going to talk to the person who's going to try and convince me to stay, maybe make an offer. I want out. I already joined another service. She says, no, you have to schedule a call with this lady. And then proceeds to send me a calendar link that I'm supposed to click and schedule a call on this lady's schedule so that I could cancel my service with them. Worth mentioning, I've been with these people for 14 years. 14 years. And this is their process. I don't take it personally. I know this is their process, but it doesn't mean I'm any less frustrated because I understand the process. So what I do, I get a little bit of a shortcut. I look up the lady's number and I call her directly. And we proceed to have a half an hour conversation at the end of the half an hour. It's a half an hour of my time where I am pushing this conversation. It culminates in me, canceling. They're going to bill me one more time, right? Because then, our policy, we always build you one more time. Of course, it's $400, $500 a month, whatever it is. But now here's the point of me bringing this up, aside from the obvious catharsis that I'm getting by venting, is I know when I get on the phone with this woman that I have to do everything in my power to not lose my shit. I'm not a fucking guru. I'm not some enlightened dude that doesn't want to wrap his hands around people's necks on a daily basis. I'm not that guy. But what separates me from most people, or separates me from me at earlier stages of my life, is I have the formulas to become stronger where the strength is appropriate. I had that conversation and I threw in a couple of fake laughs, and because I understood if I just keep the energy here, it will not compound the issue. There have been plenty of times where a conversation like that, I'm cursing somebody out, I'm losing my mind, and then I just create more problems, and it really just amounts to, if I did not sign that agreement 14 years ago, I wouldn't have to be on the phone to cancel. Do I think it's a terrible policy? Of course it is. Here I am talking about it on the thing. Nobody here is going to be signing up for fucking Keep after this or Infusionsoft after this. But that's beside the point of where my mindset should be. It's like, okay, if this is what needs to happen, then this is what I need to do. So strength is what allows me to do it without causing more damage. So strength always wins. Frank writes, the reluctance to change is sometimes because it means sacrificing the catharsis one has become used to in their state of misery. I would argue it even goes beyond that. It goes beyond the catharsis. It's really existential in nature. When we have, as a part of who we are, this woe is me aspect to our personality, it is part of us. We're the person who experiences that. To discard that is like telling somebody who enjoys hiking. I enjoy hiking, right? It's somebody who enjoys something like hiking. Yeah, don't hike anymore. It's like, well, that's kind of what I do, right? So I would argue that, yeah, sure, the cathartic process has value, but it's really, because it's been applied over a length of time, it is a component of who we are. You guys have heard me say before, we can't just stop bad habits. If we have bad habits, it is a foolish, failing plan to just say stop. By contrast, what we should be doing is replacing it with a good habit. So sure, there are a lot of things that we do that are cathartic, but not necessarily productive for us in the context of our lives, right? The bigger context. But in the moment, they feel good. It's why people get high. It's why people get violent. It's why people overeat. It's why people, abuse their spouses or their children, or like, there's all these things that in the moment, it gives them what they need, but at the expense of the big picture. And there's always going to be a point where, in order to change, we have to really ask ourselves, am I just this collection of rituals? Or are these rituals just the latest updated version of who I am in action? Right? Aaron writes, some people get mad when you suggest such things, though, because they're reliant on their weakness for clout or something. I hope they use the word correctly. No, and I agree with you, and I think what I had said before certainly applies to some extent to that. People don't want to change because, it's just a little on the nose. Like, they don't want to change because they're too weak to change. I had said this earlier in a different way, but I've had to learn that there are some people I can't be around because I'm never going to be able to get a return on my investment with these individuals. I'm not a big believer in charity. I believe in making investments. I think charity is, we have the phrase virtue signaling now, and I think that is a good as any label to use for, when talking about my criticisms of it. Charity is really the display of one's virtue in a way whose value comes from the display itself, not from the outcome of their efforts. If you really wanted to help somebody, you would help them in a way that didn't require other people to see. Now, it's not saying that you're supposed to hide it from other people, but whether or not other people see it should not be a consideration if we really are just looking to help somebody. But it is a consideration because we do want the feedback, because we do get the positive feedback of, or the positive outcome of other people's feedback, approving of our charitable acts. If I'm somebody who believes in, Educating children, right? That's a safe one. If somebody believes in education, well, if I really want to do something to affect that positively, how am I not going to consider the return on what energy that I put out when looking to measure which application is better or worse than the other? With most people, charity is really this display of virtue that gets them some sort of tribal feedback. So it's all about them. So what do I propose as an alternative, right? If I think charity is a bad habit, well, what's the alternative that we replace with? It's investing in members of our tribe. That's how we help people. We help people that are connected to us. Because if everybody did that, then everybody would be stronger for it. Every tribe would be stronger for it. If we look at it at a different scale, what I'm arguing is not forcing somebody to work out and get stronger, but teaching them to want to do it themselves. That's the same concept, but applied at the scale of the individual. The tribal scale is charity versus investing in your tribe. One produces more strength than the other. Officer involved writes or quotes, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. Obviously, much more eloquently put, even though it's a translation, right? But Marcus Aurelius, who with his perspective and his writings concerning his perspective on one's relationship with stress and anxiety or opposition, we could say, is rightfully, put on a pedestal, historically, because when you look at his writings, he is doing everything in his power to share the benefits of why we should replace one formula with another, right? So again, there's, you're only giving half the strategy if you're just talking about how this bad habit is costing you. That's only half of the game there. The other half is what the alternative is going to be, right? There needs to be a placeholder in that part of who we are as an individual. When we're talking about removing a bad habit, we've got to put something there so that we still feel whole. And it needn't be any more complicated than that. Replace bad habits with good ones. But if you're talking about being stressed, understand that everything that you do to deal with your stress also incentivizes the process of using cathartic rituals to deal with stress. So what's my alternative where stress is concerned? Movement. Just move. Oh, that's simplistic. If I'm about to lose my house, I should go for a jog. Well, when I say movement, just like strength, I don't reduce it to just a physical application of it. It certainly includes a physical aspect. If I was going to, and I'll give you, like the last time I was stressed out and aggravated, I wound up going on a hike. For me, going on a hike removes whatever stories are monopolizing my bandwidth and replaces it with an interaction and stimulus that I get from the woods. I come back, I feel better. Now, did any of my issues wind up being resolved because I went and took a reprieve? No. But when I came back as the best version of myself. Because if you have an actual issue in your life, an actual problem in your life, it's going to be there no matter how you feel about it. But if how you feel about it determines the level of your capabilities that you're bringing to addressing it, then why would we not adopt the philosophy that keeps us at our best the majority of our time, if not all of our time, right? Which is why these paradigm shifts are so important. It helps us write better stories, which keeps us at a higher state, which brings as much of our capability to the scenario as possible. Mad Guardian writes, You don't know what you don't know, but modeling a business off of a complete shell game of find who is responsible seems insane. And I think when people realize there's so little control we have over life, there's so little control we have over ourselves. When they realize just how small an amount of everything that affects us is under our control, I would just regard it as that much more significant that we really stay connected to those things we are in control of, because it's the only thing we can do. Right? Imagine, right? I got my Xbox controller here, right? And imagine that these are all the options that a person can have in their life. And you only have this one, right? A. All you got is the A button. And the game is being played. There are going to be things that are positively affected by A being pressed. But if you distract yourself by complaining about not being able to use all these other functions, and you're not even using the one you were given, then what's the value of you having any control at all? There's always going to be a subset of everything that affects you that you control. That's just the way it's always going to be. And, sitting down and having these, what if, or wouldn't it be nice, or what's the big deal? Like these conversations, it's just a waste of energy and a waste of time. The answer should always be movement. The answer should always become stronger. That's what it comes down to. Our very relationships, and I have very deliberate views on this, very clean views on this. They would be considered extreme views on this by some people because of what the applications mean. But it is you, your people, and everything that envelops you and your people, and then everything else. I have to do what keeps me at my strongest at every moment. If you are not willing to sacrifice for somebody else, then in that person, you do not see yourself. So you always have to measure those relationships by the codification of the alliance. When you hire somebody to paint your house, the nature of what you guys agreed upon should be the maximum, the absolute value of your expectations. In another application, on one of my recent mastermind calls, I was talking about if you signed a cell phone contract and you had to pay $100 on the first of every month, and you had until the 5th. I'm making stuff up here, but if you had until the 5th, and if you don't pay by the 5th, then there's a $50 penalty. Somebody calls me on the 10th and says, from the company, and says, you were supposed to pay. How come you didn't pay? I would say I wasn't supposed to pay. Yes, you were. It's $100 on the first. If you don't pay by the 5th, now there's a $50 penalty. What I interpret that as, well, it's $100 to pay on the first and $150 if I decide to pay on the 5th or later. That's the interpretation of the codified agreement based on the alliance. Yeah, but we don't want to add penalties. That's why well, I beg your pardon, sir. There's no moral or ethical compulsion here. This is a business arrangement. If you were supposed to deliver me a certain amount of service, but your company filed for bankruptcy, in other words, your company did whatever it needed to do to absolve itself of any legal responsibility for delivering on what you had promised me, would I be on the phone with you arguing ethics and morality? No, we have an actual agreement. This is what your expectations should be bound by. Understand that it just makes sense to sort of trigger and compel people's emotional side to get what we want when it comes to influence. I just am a firm believer that it will serve you better if you understand that whatever the codification of your alliance is, that is the maximum level of expectation you should have. Understand all of the iterations that this agreement can lead to. But when you place expectations that were never agreed upon by the other party, it enters in the realm of tyrannical. And the cost of being a tyrant aside, at the very least, you are being inaccurate in what you expect this relationship to be. Al Jitsu, my man, good to see you. Al Jitsu says, movement gives you a locus of control. Yes, there's a concept that I was introduced to by Two on Tom with STG called the OODA loop, right? And this concept of the OODA loop is a concept that was designed by a guy named William Boyd, Colonel Boyd, Air Force guy, and it's observe, orient, decide, act. And it is this cyclical cognitive process that we are all engaged with, whereby it's sort of like what is the right? So observe, what is the landscape, that exists? Orient, where am I in this landscape? Decide, based on the landscape and where I am, what are the options and which one's the best option that's going to align with who I am? And then finally act, do something. An observation of the OODA loop, and I've shared this before in fighting, you'll have a new guy that is sparring, and what will happen is there are too many variables for him to keep track of. It becomes too confusing, and he loses or it breaks his OODA loop. And so the certainty, he's barely understanding the landscape, but he's nowhere near finding where he is in the landscape, right? So there are no decisions that are coming to him cognitively because he's being overwhelmed. So what he'll do a lot of times is, and some like this happens a lot, he will close his eyes, because by closing his eyes, he reduced. Now, this isn't a conscious process. It just happens organically. He will close his eyes, thereby reducing the amount of information he's getting. So once he closes his eyes, it's easier for him to orient himself. He knows who he is, where he is, and gives him the opportunity to actually do something about his situation. What a lot of times is either just starting to swing for the fences, and then eventually he'll start opening his eyes because now he's acting. So he's looking to reassess what's going on. Or sometimes somebody will cower, right, into a fetal position. Why do they cower into a fetal position? Because it reduces everything in terms of what they need to pay attention to in the landscape and being able to orient where they are in the landscape in that position, right? It adds a level of certainty. It gives some control, in other words, right? So what Al says right there, which is a very profound way to put it, movement is the thing that gives us the ability to see who we are. Because when we're overwhelmed in a situation, what winds up happening is the situation starts to almost seep into who we are. You ever see those like horror movies or sci-fi movies where like somebody gets wrapped up by like roots from a tree. Next thing you know, you barely see their eye and they're becoming absorbed into the tree. When people are overwhelmed in a situation, they feel like they don't have control because they feel like their surroundings are starting to integrate themselves into the identity of the individual. When we move, we sever the ties from this situation, and it allows us to sort of break away from those connections and sort of reintroduce who we are in all of these different scenarios. It's funny, but talking about literally moving, when I was a child, we moved a lot when I was younger, right? I was born in the Bronx. We lived in the Bronx for a couple of years. We moved to California for a couple of years. Then we moved to upstate New York for a couple of years. Then when I think I was 5 or 6, we moved back to the Bronx, and I've been there. But moving from one place to the next, it allowed me to have a very, very hard-edged understanding of who I was. Because here I was being moved from one situation to the next. So the one thing that didn't happen was an uncertainty that was built from me not understanding who I was. No, I knew exactly who I was, because I'm the same motherfucker that was being put in all these different situations. It was very easy for me to spend time alone. To this day, I spend a lot of time alone because I didn't have very strong connections because we moved a lot. My immediate family, right? My mother, father, and my younger brother, we were always tight. We're still tight because we were the unit that moved to all these different places. So sometimes when your environment is being overwhelming, it's because it winds up seeping into your understanding of who you are. And that's why movement is so valuable in that context. Because it's the only thing that gives you the control, because it is the mechanism by which you assume an understanding of your orientation in your observed landscape. The OODA loop returns back to your control when you move. Hope that makes sense. On sex rights, locus of control is a skill I learned in treatment. I have control over what I say or do. Therefore, what I can say or do will minimize pain and suffering and increase peace and contentment. I absolutely agree. And I will add to that the better we get at this process, the more resilient we are to the frictions that we encounter. There was a time in my life where, it's funny because I was giving a talk the other day in my academy to my guys, and I was talking about, like, listen, and I'm not going to get into everything that I was discussing, but I was talking about when I was younger, earlier, my 20s and whatnot. If I would have had somebody on the street insult me or say something, it's like, yeah, it's on. We're going to have a thing. Whereas now, I'm not looking to have any fights in the street. I'm not looking to have any issues physically with anybody in the street. And one of the things is there's a context that I walk around with today, a big picture that I walk around with today that can't be ignored, right? So it's like hitting somebody would not even seem like something that made me feel better at this point, like it did when I was a teenager and young man, because those are the tools I was running around with. Whereas now, as soon as I would put my hands on somebody unnecessarily, immediately my ability to be there for my wife and kids gets compromised. The ability for me to be there for my coaching students gets compromised. All these people that rely on me, immediately it's compromised as soon as I put my hands on somebody. And my understanding of that is so thorough and complete that it's hard to separate that from a specific scenario. So point being, the better we get at this control, the less things affect us that normally would have affected us without any need for a conscious process to deal with it. It's like when we get stronger, the weights get lighter, right? All right, guys. Damn, we just went an hour. That was awesome. I'm going to call it there. I got plenty of stuff out. I appreciate you guys participating too. So just to sort of wrap up what I mentioned earlier, if you are not getting my emails, I'm still writing one every day. Haven't missed a day in years. So if you're not getting it, it's because it's in your spam folder, in which case mark it not spam. If you're still not getting it and you're supposed to, go to masterjim.com and please just resubscribe. I need people getting those messages that I put out. Because I have such a good time doing it, and I always get good feedback from the guys that do follow it. So please, if you want it, make sure you're getting it. All right. I'll be here next week. I appreciate you guys as always. So brothers and sisters, pressure to power.